Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host, who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of unusual literature that I have been forced to read by the nanomachines that exist inside my body. Today I wanted to talk about a book that I just read. That book is about, as you might have guessed, nanomachines, science, and experiments gone wrong. I am talking about Prey by Michael Crichton. I'm pronouncing that right. Crichton? I don't think it really matters. Pretty cool cover. You have a bunch of nanomachines. And then on the back you have a lovely picture of this doofus. Arrogant doofus in my opinion. But yeah, that's what I'll be talking about today. Michael Crichton, for those that don't know, it's hard to find those that don't know, because Michael Crichton is responsible for a lot of pop culture. Like, he wrote The Andromeda Strain. That was one of the first books he wrote, and for that to be one of the first books you write, that's saying something. He wrote movies as well, and he wrote Westworld, which again is the template for some of his other work. A amusement park where the attractions kind of grow out of control. And then later on, he would also write a number of other movies. Look up his filmography. It's pretty extensive to the point where you've probably seen a lot of the movies he's written. You probably don't know it. He wrote Congo, Jurassic Park, which is the only other book that I've read of his, and I absolutely loved. And I've been meaning to check out some more of his work since then. He also wrote Timeline, which is something I do want to check out after this, and he's since been published after his death. I think he wrote the people found his writings and ended up publishing a sequel to the Andromeda Strain. I don't know how that works exactly, but so his work is still getting out there after his death. And that's where we find ourselves today. This book was one of the last he wrote while he was alive. He also found time after this to write a book where he disputes the credibility of climate science. So he wasn't exactly, he wrote a lot about science, but he wasn't exactly the smartest tool in the shed, so to speak. He was also a giant tool in the tool shed, so that's how it goes. I thought I would talk a little bit about Prey, and then do a little bit of analysis on what I noticed in the story. So Prey follows Jack Foreman. Jack is a software engineer. He's out of work because he was fired for pretty much telling his boss that you couldn't be corrupt or something like that. And so because of that scandal, he ended up getting fired and sort of blackballed from the industry. So he's out of work. He's at home with his kids. His wife is working. She works for the Zymos Corporation, which is a tech startup company that is working on medical stuff. At least that's what Julia says. And Julia comes home one day and shows him that they're working on nanomachines that can go inside the body and fix various illnesses and whatnot. And they're sort of using it based on some software that Jack developed, which is interesting to him. At least his work is getting out there without, even though he can't get a job, I guess. So Jack begins to notice that Julia is acting strange, and at first he thinks she's having an affair, but later he suspects that she wants to get divorced or something like that, and she's manipulating the kids against him in some way, which she accuses him of doing, despite the fact that she's never around. She seems to be spending all of her time at the Zymos facility in Nevada, just trying to make a breakthrough on this nanomachine experiment they're doing. around this time, Jack's baby gets sick, and he takes it to the doctor. They can't figure out what's wrong, and the baby's crying, and they put the baby in an MRI machine. And that once the MRI machine turns on, the baby stops crying. So it's not really known what's happening there. And the doctor informs him that this is happening. This happened to at least one other person. So it's a bit unclear what's going on there. Eventually, he runs into one of the people who works with his wife, and he offers him a job because they're running into some problems at the facility and they need his help. His wife returns one day, and it appears that someone's in the car with her as she's driving off again, and she eventually gets into a car crash, and goes to the hospital. And as he's at the scene of the car crash, he notices a strange government van that is a bit curious. And so, determined to get to the bottom of everything that's going on, Jack decides to go to the facility in Nevada and take on the job as a software developer. He gets to the facility, and he immediately discovers that things are not great. The head honcho, who is a terrible businessman guy and is sort of like, we have to keep this experiment going at all costs. He informs Jack that the experiment kind of failed so far. The nanomachines have gotten outside of the complex, and they're swirling together in a dust cloud because they've been programmed that way, and they're self-replicating because of some sort of E. coli bacteria that's been programmed with them. It's very weird and probably not valid science, but Michael Crichton makes it seem like it's real. So and on the cameras outside, the facility's locked down because they don't want the nanotechnology to get inside and try to kill them. So it's like they can see it on the cameras. It's outside, and it ends up killing a rabbit by suffocating it. And Jack goes out several times through the course of the day to figure out what's going on. And one time the nanobots almost suffocate him, and they behave in a way that suggests they're acting like a predator. And they're trapping him, and he manages to get back inside the facility at least once. And he discovers that they're using his predator-prey technology, which is supposed to work on software so that it behaves in a way that it adapts to any situation and it evolves over time. And so that was meant for computers, but they've applied it to a real-world situation, which Jack says shouldn't have been done. And then they decide to go out to the power unit building thing, a group of them. Some of them die because the nanobots get them, and Jack goes back into the facility, and they decide at that point that this project needs to stop, but Ricky is against it, and so they just decide without him to just go out to where they're nesting. The nanotechnology is nesting, and destroy their nest. And they go out there and they discover that the nanotechnology is mimicking them at this point. It's sort of taken on the shape of a younger Ricky. He looks like a surf dude more than anything else. And despite this taking on a new shape, they managed to destroy the nest, and so everything seems to be complete there. However, they get back to this facility, and Jack's wife Julia has checked out from the hospital and actually flew back to the facility, and she's beginning to act a little strange, as is Ricky. And while they're away, he meets with one of the scientists, May, who informs him that on the camera, Ricky and Julia kiss. So Jack's suspicions about an affair have been confirmed. But also, they killed one of the other workers in the building on camera for some reason. And they blamed his death on something else. So something is clearly weird about that. And it's eventually revealed that they have Julia and Ricky and another character, Bobby, have nanobots inside their body that have sort of formed a symbiotic relationship. It's not clearly explained how that happened. And they're determined to, spread it around somehow. That the nanobots' motives aren't exactly clear. Jack escapes from them several times. He keeps getting captured and he keeps running away. And then eventually there's a a certain virus that they have at the facility that's meant to keep the nanobots under control. And so he floods the water supply in the building with the virus, and ends up setting off the sprinklers, and that kills everyone. Unfortunately, Julia dissolves and dies, which means she's dead, I guess. How are you going to explain that one, Jack? And then he goes home and he consults with the army so that they can deal with the problem. And then he also intentionally infects the kids with the virus because he's worried that Julia might have tried to spread the nanomachines to them. And that's about where the story ends. It ends on a sort of like weird note where Jack's a little paranoid that the nanomachines still might be around, still doing evolutions and trying to take over the world in some sort of way, despite the fact that they blew up the facility and it doesn't seem like there's any viruses around anymore. In terms of analysis, this book follows up on like what Crichton loves to do. Michael Crichton absolutely loves to talk about new technology. He did that with Jurassic Park, like in the 1990s, right as cloning was beginning to pop up in the news. He was like, "Hey, I'm writing a story about dinosaurs and how they terrorize the park." He wrote Westworld in the 1970s, before like theme park attractions really became a big deal, and so like AI taking over, that could be a possibility. So he loved to write about technology, and it's present here. He's writing about nanotechnology, given it's still a technology that hasn't been fully implemented yet. He talks more about the crossover with microbiology and software developing, which is something that I think is actually applicable. Trying to use these different fields to control the nanobots and make their justify using them in a way that justifies their large expenses. Michael Crichton loves to write about that. The reason for the technology here is that the Department of Defense wanted to create a camera that could fly over war zones and would be resistant to getting shot at, because the nanomachines could just scatter apart in that case. But what he's describing is a drone. Like, drones can be small enough to fly over military foreign governments and spy on them, and you don't need nanotechnology for that. So I don't think it holds up so well under close scrutiny like the technology, but they also try to use it to use in the medical field, and so that seems justified there. And so he also goes on about the ethics about using this technology, which you can see like corporations not understanding the power of nanotechnology could lead to a disastrous situation for those corporations and the rest of us. In this case, the nanobots could act as a sort of virus that kills everybody instead of just making them sick. And it's a man-made plague essentially. He says it a couple times in the book, so I think like he understands the ramifications of this technology, and I think it's fascinating how he explores that even further. I will also say that this story is pretty creepy. It's pretty, like, the way he describes the way the nanobots move together and how they pretty much stalk all the human characters in the story. It was very unsettling at times, and like I read this at night and I was like, okay, I'm afraid to go outside now because I'm going to get eaten by nanobots. But it does get pretty goofy later on in the story because the nanobots take on human forms, and it's just like, it feels a little Scooby-Doo-ish in my opinion. But the setup is wonderful. And there are a lot of passages in the book that are worth reading just because they make you on edge, like what's going to happen here. Like when Jack is cornered by the nanobots when he first goes outside to check on the rabbit that was sort of devoured by the nanobot. Like he's a bit worried because he's realizing that these nanobots are more sentient than he thought, and he underestimated this situation, and so it's kind of panicky, and you panic as well. However, one thing that I think hurts the story is the dialogue. The dialogue in this story sometimes goes circular, and Michael Crichton has this problem with writing dialogue, and that he writes it in a way that nobody talks. Like Ian Malcolm, for instance, in Jurassic Park, he talks in a way that's like he's overly scientific, and like for Ian Malcolm to not say anything that even the normalest human could comprehend is a bit of a problem, because who is he writing this for? Is he writing it just for the scientist, or is he writing pop science fiction? I don't think Crichton knows who it's for at times, and sometimes it seems like he's just writing uneven, jarring dialogue just because maybe he might not know how normal people speak at times. He's so far removed from everyone else. Who actually knows there? And a lot of the times it does have a Grapes of Wrath feeling, where it's like in the Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck seems to write two different things. One is a pamphlet on socialism, and the other is a story of the Jodes. And here you have the same thing. One is a sort of a summary of all the information you have on nanotechnology and modern science, and the other is a story of an experiment gone wrong. And Michael Crichton could have separated those two, or fused them in a better way, like what Steinbeck could have done. But because he doesn't do that, the story suffers for it. And I think the ending makes the story suffer as well. Like, everything about the story is grounded in science. Like, it seems realistic, probable, likely. However, at the end, Julia and Ricky reveal themselves to be nanobots, made up of nanomachines as a whole. And Michael Crichton doesn't really explain how that happened. He says something about a symbiotic relationship, but it's vague and unclear what that even means. And it also raises a lot of plot holes and raises a lot of questions. Why did they invite the one person who could stop the whole thing, Jack, to this party, to this facility? How did the other people in the facility not know that Ricky and Julia were being taken over by nanobots of some sort? It seems really ridiculous, and what are the nanobots' plan? They can take over human beings and control them. Do they want to take over the world? Why are they monologuing? There's so many questions, and it's so baffling. And it's just weird how the story leads to this moment. And I honestly, I wish Michael Crichton was alive so I could tell him that this was stupid. There's a bunch of different ways he could have ended this story that would have made sense, and this is one of them that doesn't make sense. And then afterwards, you get a whole bunch of exposition explaining why certain things happen in the story, which is weird. To just place at the end, you could have naturally set it down over the course of the story. But one thing he doesn't explain is why Ricky or Julia are nanomachines and how they got to that point. And it's really baffling, and it hurts the story, in my opinion. So overall, I would say that this is an interesting story. I guess I would recommend reading it if you're interested in nanotechnology or the new developing science, and how Michael Crichton places that in his book. But if you're interested in Michael Crichton, I would suggest reading some of his other work first. Go back and read Jurassic Park. That still holds up. I read it a few years ago. Absolutely great. Although I wonder if I go back, will I find the dialogue a little bit even more jarring now that I read this? Who knows? So if you're gonna read Michael Crichton, maybe check out some of his other work. I am interested in checking out Timeline next, because he talks about multiverse theory and quantum mechanics, and that might be interesting, or it might be bogged down by all the science talk too. Who knows? So I'll be sure to check that out. If you read this book before, or you read anything else by Michael Crichton, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you, so we can talk about the various aspects of Michael Crichton's work. In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so that we can get some more Michael Crichton books up in this jam. Until then, I wish you a pleasant time in your weird travels. Farewell.